When people become doctors, they take an oath, the Hippocratic Oath. Now, the one you see here is actually not the original. This one was rewritten in 1964 by a man named Louis Lasagna out of Tufts University, and it's actually the one that's most widely used by medical schools today. It was rewritten to remove the Greek gods and goddesses of the original, to have more secular statements, and to include an overall sense of universality, but the main points remain the same. Imagine, every doctor you know has taken this very oath. They've said these words and hopefully understood and embodied them. I'd like to draw attention to a couple of the underlying phrases. Respect. Tread with care. I treat a sick human being. The foundation of the Hippocratic Oath is respect. Respect. Every doctor you know has said these words. Immanuel Kant had a theory that had to do with respect. It's called the categorical imperative. Now, Kant's theory is incredibly complicated and a bit like reading Klingon, so I'm going to explain it just a little bit. Now, remember, this is just a generalization. I'm painting with really broad strokes here, but this is the gist. Kant states that the categorical imperative is, always act so that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in another, as an end, and never merely as a means. My translation of that is, humans must not be treated simply or solely as things, a means to an end, but always also as persons worthy of dignity and respect in themselves. You must not treat people as a means to an end. There's an ethical dilemma in the medical field when it comes to the categorical imperative. Doctors and patients can both treat each other as a means to an end. Patients can treat doctors as a means to an end by only viewing that doctor as a cure for their ailments, rather than working with the doctor to actively take part in their health. On the other hand, a doctor can treat a patient as a means to an end by only viewing them as dollar signs, rather than a person in need of help. What people seem to have forgotten is that the relationship between doctors and patients is a social contract. There needs to be mutual trust between doctors and patients. Why, you might ask? It's for that simple reason: trust. If a patient disrespects his or her doctor, that doctor loses trust that that patient is going to carry out any care practices that he or she prescribes. In turn, that doctor could grow apathetic and just provide the easiest fix for the patient to avoid extensive dealings with him or her. In turn, if that doctor grows apathetic, the patient is going to lose trust in their doctor and not carry out any care practices that that doctor prescribes. It's a vicious cycle that has to be stopped. There's a phrase that has become synonymous with the medical field. It's first, do no harm. Most people think that that phrase is actually in the Hippocratic Oath, but as you can kind of see, it's actually not. The phrase was actually coined by a man named Worthington Hooker in 1847 in his book, Physician and Patient. It seems like a given. Duh. A doctor should do no harm to their patient. But I would argue that some doctors have moved away from that standard. Could it be that by breaking that social contract between doctors and patients, that doctor is doing harm to that patient? Could it be that by treating a patient as a means to an end, that doctor is doing irreparable harm to that patient? I would argue it does, absolutely. This past summer, I did research in London. I was interested in studying that given social contract I was talking about. I studied the National Health Service, though, the NHS for short, and I interviewed some people who spoke to me about their experiences with the NHS and doctors in general. Now, remember, this is not fact. These are just some patterns that I figured out throughout this whole process, really. I did a lot of literary research, and between the interviews and the research I did, I've discovered that there's a huge discrepancy between individual doctors in terms of their training with doctor-patient relationships. The first person I interviewed was a doctor. His practice was actually up the road from where I was staying. He fit all the trappings of a good doctor. He was friendly, he was generous, he was respectable. He was in his mid-40s and had actually inherited his practice from his father, who had retired some years before. It's my pleasure to meet with you today. I inherited the practice about 6 years ago when my father retired. there are many changes I would like to make to the medical system, but sadly I'm just a doctor with a small practice. What changes would I like to make? Well, first, I'd take out the bureaucracy. There's so much red tape. The system doesn't fit medicine. They removed the people from the equation. If I could change one thing above all, I'd focus the medical system to be more centered on patient care rather than money. What characteristics should a good doctor have? Well, a good doctor is someone who listens, who accommodates. A patient should trust their doctor and not fear judgment from them. A doctor should empower their patient, make them feel a sense of expertise over their own health. Actually, it seems pretty simple, but many doctors struggle with that. Well, not anyone at my practice, of course, but many people do. You should look up the Calgary-Cambridge consultation model. That could give you more insight than I can on how patients and doctors are trained nowadays. First, let me explain what the Calgary-Cambridge consultation model is. Basically, it is a step-by-step method of discourse for doctors to learn how to interact with their patients. It is a systematic method of discourse to make sure that doctors cover all the bases when it comes to their interactions with patients. It is extremely thorough at a whopping 71 steps. I reiterate, 71. Apparently, 71 steps is simple. Really, 71 steps is just so simple. How many times can I say 71? Probably 71. But regardless of the misuse of the word simple, let's discuss some of the finer points of the Calgary-Cambridge consultation model. Step 1. Greets patient and obtains patient's name. What? That means somewhere down the line, enough people didn't ask for their patient's names, so the academics felt it important to include that into a guide. It's just, you know what it is? It's dehumanizing. It's incredibly asinine. It propagates that breaking of the social contract I'm talking about, but before I get too animated, let's move on. Number 3, demonstrates respect, attends to patient's physical comfort. Excuse me? They had to include a step in that guide to remind a doctor to demonstrate respect. But then again, this is a well-established system of teaching, so there's probably some redeemable qualities. Oh, okay, here we go. Number 40. Uses concise, easily understood language, avoids or explains jargon. Okay, well, I understand this one. It seems pretty simple, but it also seems like common sense. Actually, all of this seems like common sense. I think that might be the problem. It's too simple. So, doctors are incredibly intelligent individuals, and something as simply laid out as doctor-patient relationships, something that in reality isn't that simple, is just extraneous knowledge. On top of that, the fact that there are 71 steps is just impossible for someone, even someone as intelligent as a doctor, to remember every step. I think a lot of it is a personality issue. Some doctors have the personality that's well suited for doctor-patient relationships. They're aware and attentive in their everyday situations and interactions, so it just kind of carries over in their professional settings. But some doctors struggle with that. They struggle with the normative social interaction. The idea that doctor-patient relationships are common sense isn't so common to them. And it's very likely that those normative social interactions that they have, that we think are normal, are just not common for them at all. But regardless of their definition of what that social contract is, I don't see any reason why they should break that social contract. Because anytime you break a social contract, it results in mistrust on both ends of the communication spectrum. I have polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS for short. It's really common. Basically, it's just hormone imbalances. So my menstrual cycle is irregular, my skin is really bad, and my hair falls out. It's really just a giant pain in the ass. And I was on birth control for years to treat it, and it was great for when I was in my 20s. But now that I'm in my 30s, it's just not a good fit for me anymore. I mean, I don't want to be on birth control for the rest of my life. So I stopped taking it, and I went to my GP to see if there were any other treatment options. I mean, surely there are. And he just looked at me. And he said, well, you were on birth control. Why did you stop? Well, I told him why, and he said, well, either I take birth control or he can't help me. Well, I felt like I was just inconveniencing him. Like he didn't care about giving me the best method of treatment for me. He just wanted to do what was easiest for him. So I switched doctors. See, this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the breaking of that social contract. The patient lost trust in her doctor, so she stopped taking the birth control without consulting him first. The doctor was overwhelmed with her lack of compliance, so he just prescribed the first fix. In the end, both parties lost out on the proper care. The woman didn't get the proper care she deserved, and the doctor's practice lost a patient. I've had these warts on my foot since I got back from India. You want to see? Well, that was almost 5 months ago. My daughter-in-law tried freezing them off with the cream you get from the pharmacy. That didn't work. I had an emergency appointment with my GP today because my foot hurt so bad I couldn't walk on it properly. He just looked at it and said that he couldn't do anything for me, only give me a temporary fix. Then he just scraped some dead skin off and poked at it. Did nothing really. I could do that. I poke at it all the time. Then he said I'd have to make another appointment, but that could take up to 3 months because he's going on holiday. Stupid doctor. I've had a bloody wart for 5 months. Surely he could have fixed it by now. More waiting, I guess. Maybe I'll put some spices on it. Burn it out. Freezing it didn't work. That might. I can understand the tendency of some doctors to dislike some of their patients, especially when their patients are abrasive and stubborn. Dr. Jerome Grootman wrote in his book, How Doctors Think, about the assumptions medical doctors make about their patients and how that could affect their diagnosis. The lady with polycystic ovary syndrome could have come across as needy, so her concerns were written off. The elderly woman could have come across as ridiculous, so she was also dismissed. I get it. Doctors hope that their patients are active patients and that they understand basic healthy practices, but that's not always the case. People are ignorant, and ignoramus patients don't make the doctor's job any easier. I can list dozens of examples of nightmare patients, but regardless of a doctor's opinion about a patient, I don't see any reason for lack of care. And frankly, I'm disappointed in those doctors who don't treat a patient to the best of their abilities because they're stupid or I don't like them. Doctors need to remember that these patients are coming to them in seek of help. Something is wrong in their bodies, and they're probably scared to some degree. And I think a challenge for doctors is to understand that. How do they maintain that doctor-patient social contract that I'm talking about? I think we need to look at what the best doctors do. Those doctors who are really good with that social contract. The doctors who are just good with people. The doctors who treat patients for years and years because they're just good at what they do. I go to doctor for blood test, blood pressure, general checking, that kind of thing. I like my doctor. He's okay. Anytime I go, I got no problem. He usually just give me first fix. I had a skin rash. It hitch and hitch and hitch. So bad. He give me hydrocortisone in 1%. My daughter says that's a high dose. It kind of works. Been seeing doctor for 28 years now. He talks in a good way. Cares for me. If he doesn't, I tell him off. See, general physicians right now have the time to treat their patients and develop specialized courses of care. The doctors at the A&E, short for accidents and emergencies, don't have such a luxury. I interviewed a lot of people who had different experiences with the A&E. Last week, I had a skin rash. It was so weird, but I think it was because of what I was wearing. I got it shipped from overseas, and I didn't wash it before I wore it. Anyway, I went to the A&E because it just wouldn't go away. They said that they couldn't do anything for me there, only gave me some anti-allergen, but I had already taken some. Then they said I'd have to make an appointment at the allergy clinic. So I go to my GP to make an appointment at the allergy clinic. You know, the doctors at the A&E deal with a lot of shit every day, so you expect them to be a bit touchy, but it was actually my GP who seemed like she couldn't be bothered. It's so frustrating. They're supposed to at least act like they care about you and give a shit about your well-being. Anyway, I get to the allergy clinic and wait an hour to be seen. I get called in, and the nurse there says that she doesn't have any of my information in the computer, so that means my treatment hadn't been paid for. Let me explain. There's the GP, someone in the middle who handles the paperwork and pays for the bill, and then there's the clinic. I'm not really sure where the mix-up was, but someone didn't file in my paperwork correctly. So I call my GP, and the lady there says that she filed in her paperwork, it's not her fault. I just basically started getting really mad, and you know what the lady at the GP there said? She said, "Miss Peterson, if you're going to get angry, I am not going to help you." What the fuck? I had to take the whole day off of work just to go to the stupid fucking clinic. They could have just said, "I'm sorry, Miss Peterson, for the confusion. I'm doing my best to find a solution." At least I would have some idea that they had my best interest at heart. It's just, what if I had a worse condition or something, like cancer, and the health professionals treated me like that? The emotional damage it causes, it's a total lack of respect of what they're supposed to achieve in their profession. Like the doctor I interviewed said, there's a lot of red tape in the NHS, and there's a lot of bureaucratic steps in place to prevent seemingly false medical visits. There are limited resources, so the medical professionals are wary of people who are there at the GP just to take advantage of the system. I know it sounds bad, but that's the reality of care centers. And even the most caring of medical professionals get frustrated. Then the really sick people get the short end of the stick. I went to A&E. I was having chest pain, and I was finding it hard to breathe. I mean, I play sports every day, and I've never had trouble breathing before. So my mom took me, and we were just basically told just like sit and wait. And the nurse said there didn't look like there was anything wrong with me just by, like looking at me. But my mom had her hand on my chest like this, and she said that she could feel I was having trouble breathing, which I was. And basically my mom just told the nurse off, and a doctor came out and he took it seriously. I mean, they couldn't figure out what was wrong then, but I have an appointment at a specialist next week. Clearly, a young boy who's having trouble breathing is going to be seen right away, but the hesitancy of the nurse is indicative of the state of the medical system right now. I interviewed a lot of people who had simple injuries, broken fingers, skin rashes, that kind of thing. Ailments that weren't pressing but needed to be seen by a doctor. The biggest complaint for patients who have small injuries is the wait time. It's an inconvenience to go to the doctor, and sometimes doctors behave like they're being inconvenienced. I broke my finger, went to A&E. Literally sat there for 3 hours just to be seen. I get called in and the nurse there says I have to go to x-ray. No shit, I have to go to x-ray. I have a broken finger. So I wait an hour to get my x-ray, and then I have to wait another hour to get my results. The doctor says I have a broken finger, and I have to make an appointment at the fracture clinic. So the nurse there just tapes me up and helps me make an appointment at the fracture clinic. I thought the appointment would be for the next day, seeing as I had a broken finger. No. The appointment was made for 14 days later. My finger could be healed by then. I don't know why they couldn't just give me a splint right there at the A&E. I mean, they waste so much time sending us to different departments. It's so bureaucratic. You know what? It's an ordeal. I mean, it's good, it's paid for, but it's an ordeal to go to the doctor. If I could afford it, I would totally go private. But on the other hand, when you're sitting at the A&E, you're never bored. I mean, I was there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. To my left is a woman vomiting uncontrollably. In front of me is another woman screaming her bloody head off. And to my right is a man covered in blood. It's mid-afternoon. How do you injure yourself to the point to where you're covered in blood? Also, why wasn't he treated right away? I broke my finger and had to go to A&E. We arrived at 6 o'clock p.m. and I was seen at 9 o'clock p.m. They said I would have to wait, but I didn't think I'd have to wait that long. And then they said I'd have to get an x-ray. So I got my x-ray at 10:30, and then they said I'd have to get a splint, but I'd have to wait for the plastic surgeon for some reason. I got to see the plastic surgeon at 12 o'clock a.m. And then he said I'd have to wait some more, but I don't really know why. And then I finally got to leave at 1 o'clock a.m. Just for a broken finger, I was at the hospital for 7 hours. And I was so tired, but I remember they had a movie playing. Have you seen Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs? Well, the DVD kept skipping in the player right at the climax when he turns into a chicken. And then it would start over. I still don't know the ending to that film. I get in triage and in emergency care centers, a patient who's really sick is going to be seen over someone who has a broken finger. But these small injuries, these broken fingers and skin rashes, are turning points in that social contract I'm talking about. The biggest complaint time for patients at the A&E is the wait time. And doctors don't have enough time to adequately see all of their patients. Doctors need time to adequately diagnose and treat their patients, and patients need time to gain a sense of trust in their doctor. On top of that, we run into those targets that those doctors are supposed to meet. If a doctor has to treat a certain number of patients, there has to be a limited amount of time for each patient to be seen. There has to be a system in place to allocate for the depth of injury, where a patient with a broken finger isn't going to be seen nearly as quickly or for nearly as long as someone who's having a heart attack. I know it sounds like the government system sounds like the problem here, and that the red tape and the government issues are what slows the system down, but the system is good because it's free, and everyday people have access to medical care. And in serious situations, everyday people have access to timely medical treatment. I'll give you an example. Imagine the Thing from Fantastic Four. That's what I looked like. I had a reaction all over my body except for my face. I called my GP, and she said that an allergic reaction would take effect quickly and that I would not be able to breathe. Not 10 minutes later, I felt my chest tighten, so I called my husband and told him to get home now. Then I passed out. I don't remember what was happening, but I do remember feeling in limbo. I thought, right, this is it. This is how I'm going to die. I was taken to A&E and treated right away, and I guess they did the job right because, well, I'm still here. I was thankful for the NHS that day and their fast ambulance service. Now there's talk of them shutting down the closest 2 facilities, including the children's A&E. I don't know what we'll do if that happens. The closest A&E after that is an hour's drive away. Now the resources of the government are running out. Times are changing, and it's really expensive for the government to provide health care to all of their citizens. I interviewed an elderly woman who had been with the NHS since its inception after World War II. She talked about how the system has changed dramatically. Having a baby now is very different than when I had kids. My son had jaundice, and they kept me and him in the hospital for 12 days. They gave me a place to sleep, they fed us, and they gave him diapers. They used to give you a starter kit, the government, with some food and diapers and some money. Now they don't do any of that. When my granddaughter was born, they got them out of there as soon as they could. They even had to bring their own diapers. See, times are changing. People value different things. I value making money as much as the next person. I work hard to earn my keep in this world, just like other functioning members of society. But we forget the root of why we do anything anymore. The NHS never started out as a system of making money. It was never about making money. The NHS started out as a system for a war-torn country who needed hope. The people needed to feel taken care of. The last person I interviewed was an 8-year-old girl. She was extremely shy and held onto a stuffed animal as I spoke with her. She had trouble with my questions at first. I'm not really sure if I asked them exactly right, but as she got more comfortable with me, her answers opened up immensely. I had stomach pain right here. And the lady doctor I had, she was really good. She explained everything and didn't make me wait too long. And then there was another doctor, and he had a bit of an attitude. He said, I can't be with you right now. I have to go see someone who's worse. But it was just the way he said it. And then I had a wart, and the lady doctor was really good. She said that if I put the cream on, it'll be better in a month. And then when I had my allergies, I knew it was going to be okay because it was just allergies. And everyone kept telling me it was normal. And then there was this Chinese doctor once, and he was not nice. He kept feeling my brother's back but not saying anything to him, and it felt like he wasn't doing his job right. And then another doctor came in and explained everything to him. Now, I thought I wasn't going to be able to use her interview because of how vague her answers were, but then she said this. The doctors have never been mean to me, but they have been to my mom. Yeah, the doctor was rude to her right in front of us. I'm not really sure what they were talking about, but I was just afraid for my mom and my brother. I think people at the doctor should be friendlier, more respectful. Like don't argue with parents in front of their kids. That little 8-year-old girl had the most profound assessment of the medical system. She simply said doctors needed to be more respectful. That's really what it comes down to. Yes, this is important, but it's also too much. That's really it. Respect. It all comes down to respect. It's a very simple notion that the social contract between doctors and patients comes down to respect. Hippocrates knew it in his time. Kant knew it when he was laying out his philosophy. Louis Lasagna knew it when he was rewriting the Hippocratic Oath. That little 8-year-old girl knew it last summer, and I'm here telling you now. We changed the state of the medical system by understanding that the fundamental relationship between doctors and patients is based on mutual respect. Respect, a concept we learn in primary school. Children understand respect and often understand it better than grown adults. If we could just respect one another, treat each other as valuable human beings, we can change the state of the medical system as a whole. I'm looking forward to that day, where mutual respect is commonplace. And I will work every single day until that happens. R-E-S-P-C-T